Our next presenter is Melissa Moore. She's the Curator of Behavioral Husbandry and Ambassador Animals at the St. Louis Aquarium. Today's topic is enriching the lives of our Raptor ambassadors. Melissa?
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's raptors. And in addition, to talk about enrichment. Anything having to do with behavior is something I can nerd out on and get behind 110%. So let's just talk a little bit today for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so about enrichment in a very specific group of birds, or a very specific group of animals, the birds of prey, or raptors. One of my favorite photos of a great horned owl that I ever was able to capture is right here. So when you think of enrichment, with birds or with any animal, what sort of things come to mind? You can sort of imagine what pops into your head. So this picture of this young bald eagle here playing with a pumpkin, obviously around Halloween time, so had its enrichment item. So before we go too deep into this, I want to answer a question that may be lingering in your minds. You may have heard in my introduction, I am a curator at the St. Louis Aquarium, and you may be wondering, how does a person who works at St. Louis Aquarium end up talking to you today about enriching the lives of raptor ambassadors, especially when you consider the fact that St. Louis Aquarium currently does not hold any raptor ambassadors? Well, let me give you just a brief background on myself. I started in this field, working with wildlife in 1984 at the World Bird Sanctuary here in St. Louis. This is my hometown. I was able to work in rehabilitation, education, and propagation with birds of prey, mostly birds of prey, also with some other species of birds. My first paying job in this field was working at bird shows, presenting bird shows at the Milwaukee County Zoo. And that's really what got me hooked into working with raptors, and in particular, working with raptor ambassadors. We had a free flight bird presentation that I did for 3 summers there. The rest of my career has been focused on working with ambassadors, primarily in education and on exhibit, and definitely a strong focus on birds, and especially on birds of prey. In fact, I was a falconer for 20 years. About 15 of those years I spent as a master level falconer, flying Harris hawks and goshawks and a variety of other species. I also spent some time at the Black Hills Reptile Gardens as a curator of birds, and a couple of wildlife centers as director, working with native wildlife and primarily native species of raptors. And then I was fortunate to work as education director at the University of Minnesota Raptor Center, and eventually found myself back here in St. Louis managing no birds, but getting to work with ambassador animals all the time nonetheless, and in the field of behavioral husbandry. So things that I really enjoy. And I feel very fortunate in my career to have had the chance to work so much with birds, but also now with other species as well. So that's just a little bit of background. So what are we going to talk about here for the next 30 or so minutes? We're going to talk about the species involved, that the large group of raptors in general. That's a very large group of animals, and we're kind of lumping them all together. Talk about what is enrichment in the framework of talking about raptors, and a little bit more about the goals of enrichment, and then some examples, and a little bit about how to evaluate enrichment items, especially as they relate, of course, to raptors. So our subjects today, raptors. Now, depending on who you talk to, there are somewhere between about 480 and 550 different species of birds of prey. Now, not all of those are kept in captivity or in human care commonly, but many of them are. And the diversity is mind-blowing. If we just take the number 500 different species and we think about what all of that means, all of those species of raptors have different natural histories. They have different life stories. They have different ways of getting their food. They have different ways of interacting with the environment and interacting with conspecifics and animals of other species. So it's a very broad group. We can say a few general things about these animals, of course, and if you work with them, you know these off the top of your head. They're predatory. They're obligate meat eaters. So they have to eat meat in order to survive. And so they capture and kill their prey. And generally they do that using excellent vision and or hearing. And that's, again, a very general, broad statement. And again, another general broad statement, they usually have talons, sharp talons or claws, and strong feet. And they usually have a hooked beak. But notice here on this slide, even there are three very different categories of raptors. We have a diurnal bird on the right side, that is a hawk. We have a nocturnal bird in the middle. And on the other side of the screen, we have another diurnal raptor, sometimes not considered to be a true raptor because it is a carrion-eating species, the turkey vulture. And so these are just representatives to show you how different and how vast this group, that not even are all very closely related necessarily genetically, but are grouped together by their characteristics and the way they hunt, the way they get their food. So remember, when you're dealing with this group, you're not dealing with one animal, you're dealing with a huge number of animals with a very different and varied natural histories. So that is the caveat that we're going to lay our next conversations on about enrichment. So back to my original question, what do you think of when you think of enrichment? This is what I would say a vast majority of us, what it pops into our heads. Enrichment items, right? Things that you can give to an animal. And everything on this slide are things that have been given to raptors, and generally very safely. You may also think of categories instead of items. You may think of categories like cognitive or sensory items, or food items, or environmental enrichment, or behavioral sort of enrichment. And all of that is totally valid and good ways to look at enrichment. And certainly all of these items are very valid for enrichment items for raptors. But I would challenge everyone to think for a moment, what is the goal of enrichment? What are we trying to do with enrichment? And this is something that probably have talked about over and over during this conference, right? It's to improve the welfare of the animals involved. And I say that's maybe just a little too general for us to deal with in a tangible fashion. So let's break down what I would suggest are some, well, let's head in the direction of what kind of goals we can talk about. I suggest that instead of looking just at inputs, what you're going to give an animal for enrichment, that we also consider outputs. Consider asking, what is my goal in giving this animal some enrichment? This is a red-tailed hawk, incidentally, playing with, that's an interesting term, playing with a piece of sisal rope that's been tied in a knot. And you can see she's actually holding it in her left foot. I found this to be particularly amusing because I had never seen a red-tailed hawk hold something. And she was very parrot-like in this particular moment of playing with this piece of rope. So again, thinking about outputs instead of inputs. Instead of just thinking, what can I give this bird to play with? What can I give this animal to play with? What's the goal I'm trying to achieve by giving her some enrichment? So here are the goals that I've come up with and that I like to work with. Especially, I find that it's very, it fits very well with raptors, but it really can fit for almost any species. First one, goal number one, you could try eliciting a species-specific or a natural behavior. Second goal of enrichment might be to reduce boredom or encourage curiosity. A third goal might be to change the way the animal uses its enclosure, uses its habitat. And finally, give the animal the opportunity to experience choice and control. So these are the goals that I like to keep in mind. Again, thinking about outputs. So the outputs, when we look at these goals, for example, eliciting a species-specific or natural behavior, the output that we're looking for is that natural behavior. We are looking for encouraging curiosity or changing the way it uses its enclosure, or showing, being able to demonstrate that the animal has had some choice and control. So in practice, what does that mean? So when I look at what enrichment could be for a raptor, and this is a black vulture in this picture. This is at Tracy Aviary, actually, good friend of mine at Tracy Aviary flying a black vulture. So to me, this is potentially a great situation or opportunity for enrichment for this black vulture, because it is eliciting or offering a natural behavior. Flying is obviously a very natural behavior for the black vulture. And here it has the opportunity to present that behavior. So I would say that this is an opportunity for enrichment for this animal. I would suggest that this is also an opportunity for enrichment. This is a young bald eagle having a bath, a very natural behavior. A big bath pan like this, a big kiddie pool, is a fantastic opportunity for enrichment for a large bird like this. So what's the goal we're looking for here? We're trying to elicit a natural behavior. In this case, that natural behavior is bathing. And this particular bird is very into her baths, all the way in fact. Always fun to watch a bird bathe. I can tell by the hearts flying up here that you guys probably agree. Another natural behavior that we can elicit is tearing. And when you look at an animal like a turkey vulture, right? A vulture is an animal that eats carcasses, sticks its head inside of a carcass, tears apart food items. It's a very natural behavior. It's something they really need to do. Having opportunities to tear is very important for a turkey vulture in its welfare. A lot of places give supplemental food, or maybe use a primary food source that is a meat product. And there's not anything necessarily wrong with that meat product in terms of nutritionally, but it does not provide the enrichment, the tearing ability that a lot of these raptors really need in order to have excellent welfare. So supplementing that nutritional meat product with something like, say, a rabbit head or a bone that the animal can tear apart. It's excellent enrichment opportunities, and really, really speaks to providing an animal excellent welfare. On the converse side, on the flip side, you'll find that if you don't provide enough opportunities for an animal like a turkey vulture to tear in captivity, in human care, it will find a way to apply that behavior. So any of these mats or rope that you might put in there to protect the bird's feet, it will tear at those. So having the ability to tear, the opportunity to tear, is really important. The next, you can look at how to use, how the animal is using the enclosure. So an enclosure might be rather sterile with a few perches, but there are other ways to dress up the enclosure, offer a multiple series of perches in different positions, different angles, different views, and change the way the animal uses the enclosure. I consider this to be an excellent form of enrichment. If you look at this particular enclosure, you'll see many different kinds of perches, and you'll see them pointing in different directions, at different heights, at different levels, looking in different, different areas, looking out over different areas. Very important for raptors who tend to be very visually oriented. So having the opportunity to sit and look out and look long distances, I think is a very important part of enriching the life of a bird of prey. And then maybe even changing up those perches on a regular basis or semi-regular basis to provide new opportunities for ways to use the enclosure. I think, yeah, this is another video here. This is a northern goshawk in human care, and this was its enclosure that we saw in the previous slide. And you can look here at the front view of this enclosure and see that this bird, even though it has a damaged wing, is able to use a variety of perches in the enclosure. And this is just a short clip, but it hops around from perch to perch and has easy access to many different spaces within that enclosure. Another way we can look at enrichment is to talk about sensory stimulation. And remember, as we said earlier, these are very broad statements. So when I'm talking about making a broad statement like this, it's not going to apply to every species, but these are things that you can think of in general categories. So oftentimes, diurnal or day hunting raptors are very visually focused. So changes in what they see can be enriching, and sometimes it can be also scary in air quotes. So it can be overstimulating in an aversive sort of way. But you can use that knowing, that knowledge that they are very visually focused to offer them the opportunity to look at things, to see things. We used to use the term eagle TV. We would take one of our eagles at the Raptor Center and move her to a different enclosure. And that particular enclosure provided her the opportunity to see very long distance, could see into a parking lot, could see out into the street. And she would sit there literally fixated all day, just looking out at what was going on in the outside world, as it were. And that in and of itself provided her enrichment because she was so visually focused. Again, a very broad statement, but it can work. Nocturnal raptors, on the other hand, may be both visually and auditorially focused. So both things that they hear and things that they see. So again, providing them the opportunity to see things, to see new things, and also sounds, different sounds in their environment, new sounds, sounds that will stimulate their natural behaviors, perhaps. Turkey vultures are an unusual raptor in that they also have the ability to smell very acutely, and they use their sense of smell in finding food. So this is an opportunity to provide, to use that sense for them for enrichment. So different smells, they might be interested in some smells, not interested in other smells. Different scents could definitely be stimulating for them. Again, another broad statement, turkey vultures can be very neophobic. Without training, enrichment items can present as very frightening. So something to keep in mind if you are thinking about how to provide enrichment for a turkey vulture, that's something to be aware of, that they might need additional training to become accustomed to it and comfortable with that item. So some examples when we're talking about sensory. Thinking about with diurnal raptors, what can they see from their enclosure? Does it change? As I mentioned, eagle TV. Do they get to move to a different enclosure, perhaps, and see a different perspective on the world? That can be enrichment. Do they get, or is it just the same thing day in and day out? I would consider that to be a more sterile environment than one that was changing. And for nocturnal raptors, what sights and sounds might they find intriguing? And do they have the opportunity to shelter as they listen or watch? Especially the small owls oftentimes need to have shelter, need to feel like they are able to get away and hide, even though they're looking at something they find interesting. They want to be able to feel safe, feel secure while they are observing those items. So in this photo, for example, you'll see a saw-whet owl who is very interested in what's going on, but she likes to stay inside of her hutch in order to watch those because she feels more comfortable there. So very important to provide an opportunity to feel secure, even though you're also providing them the opportunity to look at something new. As someone who's very much into behavioral husbandry and training, I would also say training can be very enriching, and we can go back to our goals and think about the goals that we mentioned before. For example, training for cooperative care. So you're training a bird to participate in its own health care, perhaps training that animal to get into a crate so that that crate can then be taken to the vet, and then the bird can have its vet exam. Or even as simple as training the bird to come to a scale so that it can be weighed voluntarily. All of that cooperative care training provides the animal with an opportunity to exercise choice and to exercise some degree of control over its environment. So going back to our goals for enrichment, that's right on target. Training also for participation in programming. So choice and control is exerted there, the opportunity to exhibit a natural behavior, perhaps in an educational program, and certainly may reduce boredom or help elicit curiosity in having an animal participate in educational programming, getting to see an audience, getting to perhaps demonstrate a natural behavior like flying in front of an audience, perhaps, or eating in front of an audience. And note that when I'm talking about training here, I am speaking about operant conditioning. So I'm talking about where the animal has the opportunity to earn reinforcement, generally positive reinforcement, for performing a behavior. So there's written into that, or part of that goes without saying, that there's a level of choice and control in that sort of training. You can also train a bird to change the way that animal uses its enclosure. This is something that we've done with rehabilitating animals, and falconry birds often use this technique. So it's providing the bird the opportunity to exercise even within its enclosure, using different perches, using different heights within the enclosure, all of those sorts of things. If you train the bird to do those things, you're offering it another opportunity for enriching its life. And then again, training to engage with enrichment items. Turkey vultures are not the only animals that can be fearful of new enrichment items. It's always important to take that into consideration, that when you're offering any item to any bird. So this is just an example of choice and control during a training session. This is a red-tailed hawk learning to go into its crate. And as you can see, the door is open to the crate, and the bird has the opportunity to come out of the crate at any time that it wants to. And so it has the opportunity to exercise its choice in this matter, and to control how long it stays in that crate. I mentioned cooperative care training and weighing or voluntary weighing. Here is an example of that. This is a great horned owl. Let's see if we can get the video going. There we go.
Okay,
And
I'll be right there.
so this is an opportunity for this bird to come to the scale within its enclosure. You can do this in many different ways. This particular great horned owl was learning to do it here in its enclosure, even though it was tethered. It was a safety situation for the bird and the handler, and it worked out really nicely. But the bird, you can see, is completely hands off, participating in its own care. And I'd like to point out just the attitude of the bird in this whole video. The bird is 100% focused on the trainer, is very much engaging with the trainer, even vocalizing with the trainer, and following the trainer along throughout the enclosure. So to me, that's a bird that looks like it's engaged with the handler, the trainer, and has, at least in this moment, I would say, looks like it has good welfare. And I would think that that's an enriching moment for that bird too. Also, you have the added benefit of reducing the stress of basic husbandry. So if the bird does a lot of these stuff, a lot of these items, a lot of these, behaviors cooperatively, then the animal doesn't need to be grabbed. It doesn't need to be forced into a crate. So you're automatically improving the animal's welfare. All right, so now we'll get all the way back around to talking about items. A lot of different items can be used for raptors. The main thing is to look at safety, right? We talked about raptors liking to tear, in particular turkey vultures, but you always have to take into consideration that they have a hooked beak so that they can tear up their prey. So anything that they're going to be given must either be strong enough that they can't tear it, or must be not dangerous if it does get torn up. Some of my favorite items to use are paper items, like you see at the top of this slide, paper egg cartons, brown paper bags, paper boxes, things like that. And then again, also these Kongs and other sorts of dog toys can be used for raptors as well. Again, keep in mind the outputs, right? What are the goals of giving them this enrichment item? So for me, I would be thinking about, for example, reducing boredom and eliciting curiosity. I always get a laugh at this photo because the turkey vulture is eating a turkey Tom sandwich from Jimmy John's. Not really, but that's what the box says. So we would repurpose a lot of these boxes and maybe put their diet in there. So instead of just getting the diet handed to them or set on their mat, they also get the opportunity to tear and actually find their food and work at it to get it out. So an opportunity to tear presented within their diet presentation as well. I'm glad to see some laughing faces there. Here's a bird, a young bald eagle again, the one that was bathing before, using some paper items.
He's like, where do I start?
There we go. This is a large pile of paper items given to her by her caretakers. Brown paper bags, newspaper. And you can see she doesn't even know where to begin, playing with them all, tearing them up, doing behaviors that are very natural for a bald eagle, right? Tearing, using her feet, holding what would be like she was holding prey. She's holding the paper items. So eliciting a natural behavior here, as well as reducing boredom and perhaps eliciting curiosity. So maybe even achieving more than one of the goals that we mentioned earlier. She could go on like this all day. Now, mind you, this particular bald eagle came into human care as a young bird, and she came into human care because she was already, somebody had interacted with her, and so she was already accustomed to people. So she has been exposed to an enormous pile of paper toys for a long time, for most of her life. A brand new bird coming out of the wild and coming into human care wouldn't be a good idea to just throw all this in their enclosure and say, good luck. It would be very potentially intimidating or fear-inducing. So you'd want to work up slowly so that a bird had the opportunity to learn about enrichment items and to get used to them. All right. And safety first, always safety first with raptors, as with any animal when you're offering enrichment. Even though we have some generalizations we can say about species of raptors or groups of raptors, it always comes down to a study of one. This particular great horned owl, for example, whatever enrichment item she was given, she would tear it up and eat it and swallow it. So we had to be very, very careful what she was given. And eventually we settled on heads of lettuce were about the only thing that we could trust her to destroy, to eat, and it would pass through her pretty much harmless, no problem. The vets approved it, said that that was the one thing that she was allowed to have until she got over her desire to eat every enrichment item. Yeah. She actually really enjoyed it. She would kill the heads of lettuce with her talons and rip them up with her beak. So an opportunity or an option for you if you have a raptor who tends to tear into things and eat things. But safety is of the utmost importance. You don't want them ingesting something that they shouldn't be ingesting. That's why some of the paper items we used a lot, because generally those are pretty safe, even if they did happen to accidentally ingest some. And of course, heads of iceberg lettuce were considered fairly safe. Enrichment can be a lot of things. This particular bald eagle destroyed all of his enrichment, and then as it was being raked up and taken out of his enclosure the next day, decided that he would then come and interact with the rake and the enrichment items that were being raked up. So you just never know what's going to be enriching and interesting to the animals involved. Let's not forget about naturally occurring enrichment. Sometimes you don't have to plan it other than just to allow it to be part of the animal's environment. So this particular bald eagle, the same one actually who loved bathing, you can see her here. She is interacting with snow. And she's footing it, she's jumping around in it, eating it, picking at it. All again, eliciting natural behaviors. This would be not unheard of for a young bald eagle to be exploring in this way. So you can see her using her sense of curiosity, certainly reducing her boredom, and certainly eliciting natural behaviors. And then she grabs a piece of grass. Why not? It's just right there. Another natural behavior, and this is just occurring in the natural environment, what's available to her, sunshine. And she is taking a nice sun bath here. So this also can be enriching, again, eliciting a natural behavior. Also very important to their health in having exposure to sunshine or the ability to make vitamin D. So we've talked a lot about what can be enriching to raptors. Now, how do you evaluate that? Well, I hinted at it a little bit with a great horned owl participating in her cooperative care. But here are some other thoughts. So we need to look at evaluating the animal's environment, evaluating the animal's welfare, and evaluating the enrichment itself. So number one way that I look for comfort behaviors. So number one thing I look at is looking for comfort behaviors. All three birds on this slide are demonstrating very comfortable postures for raptors. You can see the hawk on the farthest left of the screen, loose feathers, very not fluffed up, not puffed up, but just loose body feathers. Same thing with the screech owl on the right of the screen, loose feathers. The screech owl also, you can see he has feather tufts, but they're not standing up, nor are they slicked back. They're just loosely laying there on the back of the head. All three birds, this is the kind of posture I would want to look for. I'd want to see this around enrichment items. I'd want to see them standing this way on their perches, very comfortable. Would make me feel good about how this bird is psychologically. You can also look at feather condition. This is not 100% reliable, but looking at feather condition is really important. It will tell you if there is something wrong in the bird's environment. Now, this particular bird What was wrong in this bird's environment is that she tried to build a nest in gravel every single year and jammed her tail into the gravel, breaking the tips. But you'll see this a lot of times in birds who have improper mesh or wire on their cages, on their enclosures, and they may hang on the enclosure. They may get blisters on their toes. They may jam their tails into the wire. They may also get this behaviorally if they are spending a lot of time trying to get away or fly towards something. You'll see broken feathers. So this is something that as bird caretakers, we always want to avoid as best we can. This particular bird was a real tricky one. And then again, looking for voluntary participation, engagement with the trainer or handler. I mentioned that earlier. This particular video, I was surprised. I've worked with raptors now for 35 years, and I would never have guessed that a great horned owl would understand in this particular way. Let me just play the video.
Boobo, where's your ball? Where's your ball? Where's your ball? Where's your ball? Boobo, where's your ball? Good girl.
I was shocked that the owl understood what her trainer was saying, but she obviously did. She was engaged with the trainer. She went and was looking for her ball. She went and immediately engaged with the ball. As far as I was concerned, this bird was in a really good place psychologically, and it's good feather condition. The enclosure looks good. The bird looks good. Everything to me looked good in this particular situation. So, by the way, I asked the trainer to make this video because when she came and told me that the bird knew where her ball was, I said, no way, you're going to have to prove it. So she did. So anyway, those are things you can look for when you're talking about enrichment and evaluating a program. So in summary, I like to talk about the goals of enrichment: eliciting a species-specific behavior, reducing boredom, encouraging curiosity, changing the way an animal uses its enclosure, and providing the animal with choice and control. Many ways to accomplish these. We just talked about a few of them here today. But most important is to know something about the natural history of the species involved, not just raptors in general, but this particular species. And then you'll have to get to know the individual to understand whether it's safe or not. And remember, if you focus on the goals, the outputs, and keep safety at the front of mind, you should have foundation of a successful enrichment program. And that's all I have for you today. I think I have a few. There we go.
Yep. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Awesome.
Right. We have a couple questions for you. The first question, Melissa, is we have a geriatric, non-flighted male great horned owl who was raised in a very odd way. He was never offered food in the daytime, only eats after dark, never taught to take food from people, and only handled through learned helplessness. He is fully retired from handling due to behaviors showing he does not enjoy it, and we have no way of rewarding him. I have yet to find an enrichment he will interact with. He does use his various perches and moves around his enclosure, but we are running out of ideas.
Yeah, that's a real tough one. We're seeing that a lot. Some of these older ambassador birds that were trained not using operant conditioning in the past, and now they're older and kind of set in their ways. And that is tricky. I think I would recommend that you start looking at ways that don't involve very much human contact, right? So what can he look at? What can he listen to? Can you change things outside of his enclosure? Can you change what he sees outside of his enclosure? Can you change his perches around on a semi-regular basis in a way that he can still use his enclosure, but maybe use it a little differently. You might try presentation of food in different places. You might try putting the food inside paper items, and you can start like with a paper egg carton laying fully open, right? So he can just see it and doesn't have to work hard, and you can slowly work towards having it just a part of the food covered, and then a little more of the food, and pretty soon he might learn that food can comes in these paper egg containers, and you could try paper bags. It is tricky. I would focus in that direction, and then also think about the type of food presentation. So if he's getting mostly rodents for his diet, can you change that up? Can you find a way to get him a rabbit head? I know it sounds awful, but it's something that he can really carry around, use in his talons, and really tear it up and destroy it. Or maybe a part of a deer that has been hunted, and it's not a part that people want, but maybe he can carry that leg around, for example. I hope that helps. If there's any other way I can help, please reach out to me directly. I'm happy to offer more.
Do you do anything special to prevent frostbite or allow winter bathing safety?
Okay, so taking a bath in the winter. So yes, we have always had minimum temperature guidelines, and it just depends on the species. So if you have, let's talk about native raptor species, since they're most commonly kept. For a native raptor species, if it can handle the cooler temperatures, I might provide a bath pan anytime the weather is sunny and over, let's say, 35 or 40 degrees, depending on species. But with the caveat that I'd want to take that bath pan away before dark, so that, well before dark, so that the bird has the opportunity to dry off in the sunshine before the sun sets and it gets cold, and they may freeze on their feathers. Now, generally a bird could handle that in the wild, but again, in human care, they don't have as many choices available to them. So we always err on the side of caution and protect them. So I would say, above 35 or 40 degrees, or if you wanted to be safe, say above 45 and sunny, provide them that bath pan, and then take it away a couple hours before sunset. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Next question. We also have a female great horned owl that eats everything, including Kong toys. Besides lettuce, we are down to metal, wood, and super hard plastic. Any other suggestions for enrichment items? She loves playing with enrichment, carrying items, tugging on them, and moving them around.
Yeah, I think you'd want to work with your vet on this for sure. Make sure that the vet approves of any items, but the head of lettuce is a good one. I would also look at things like rabbit heads and, items like that she can fully take apart and is totally safe for her to eat. And then maybe talk to your vet and see how much of paper product your vet feels comfortable with that bird ingesting. Sometimes a small amount of some of the real safe papers, like the egg carton papers, in small quantities, a vet might say that's okay. But it is a tricky one. I'd stick with things like bones, large bones. She can't swallow sizes that are too big for her to swallow, but she might like to carry around. Some of them like large rocks even to carry around, or sticks. All things that you can try, but watch out, she might eat sticks. Hopefully not. Good luck with that. And again, if you have more questions, or if I can help in any other way, you can reach out to me directly.
Okay, thank you, Melissa, for that presentation.